Well, here I am, a Canadian, about to comment on American politics. Some would say it's none of my business, but as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, said, being like a Canadian is being like a mouse who has to sleep beside an elephant. Um, that mouse is pretty alert to what's going on beside him. So we're pretty alert to what's going on in the US. And recently, once again, we have Donald Trump. Believe it or not, a majority of Americans voted for this criminal, this felon, this vulgar, shameless character. What does it mean for American democracy for the people to have elected a criminal and put him in the White House? Symbolically, no matter what else the presidency means, symbolically, it used to represent something of an ideal. Apparently no longer. For some reason, perhaps a majority of Americans want an anti-ideal as their president. Now, why could this be? I mean, there are no doubt many reasons why the election turned out this way, but what can psychoanalysis contribute to understanding this? Well, a great psychoanalyst, Leo Rangel, published a book on Watergate. I think it was in 1980 that Rangel, Rangell, brought that book out. Rangel was discharged from the U.S. Army at the end of the war, and he moved to California. And he started watching Richard Nixon. He was pretty interested in Nixon's career. He knew that Nixon was something of a sociopath, and he saw him prospering in his political career. He, of course, was not surprised by the Watergate shenanigans, but he had some interesting things to say. American ego psychology viewed the mind in terms of its three main structures: the id, the more or less asocial or antisocial passions of sex and aggression; the ego, the seat of reason and rationality and reality testing; and the superego, the moral functions, the inner critic, the moral value system. And Freud saw conflict among these three structures. And Freud pointed out how defenses could be mobilized by the ego under pressure by the moral demands of the superego. The ego could mobilize defenses against the antisocial passions and desires and impulses of the id. But Rangel pointed out that the ego could also motivate defenses not just against the id, but against the superego. So here we all are, pressured by our superego, which gets us to turn our id aggression back against ourselves. It's an inner punishing agency. It holds us to certain moral standards. It criticizes us when we do not. It often criticizes us just for wishes, let alone for actions. And so we live under the pressure of the moral demands of the superego. And these moral demands can lead us to be pretty unhappy with ourselves. It can cause us to suffer a great deal of guilt for not adhering to the rules or even for hating the rules. So we suffer guilt, low self-esteem. Under the pressure of the superego, we're having to put up with a great deal of frustration. We're having to turn away from our desires. We don't want to pay our taxes, but we force ourselves to pay our taxes. We don't want to be necessarily faithful to our partners, but we have to stifle such impulses. We want what we want when we want it, but the superego inflicts a great deal of guilt if we try to live in that way. So we're walking around not feeling that great about ourselves, feeling frustrated, feeling resentful. Some people seem to get away with a lot more than we do. One such person who gets away with a lot more than we do is one Donald Trump. Teflon man. He defies the authority we feel we have to submit to. The courts, the police, the judges, the prosecutors can't seem to get to him. He seems godlike in his power to evade the rules and the laws that we struggle to adhere to. We're full of resentment at the demands that society and the law and the superego puts on us. But here's a guy who seems to be able to merrily go his way, to float the law, to float social opinion, and to prosper. So why are people loving him? Well, the answer is he's shameless. We don't get away with these things, but he appears to. So if we make him our ideals, if he can get away with these things that we make ourselves suffer for even wanting, our level of guilt, I think, goes down. Our level of shame at our own antisocial impulses and tendencies goes down. Why should I feel ashamed? Look what the President of the United States is able to do and get away with. Why is it necessary for me to force myself to adhere to these rules? He rises above them. Why should I feel so badly about myself for my longings towards infidelity? He appears to be chronically unfaithful to his wife. So things that I used to feel ashamed of, I feel less ashamed of. The president is able to do these things. Should I feel ashamed for my wish to cheat on my taxes or on my spouse? Not when the President of the United States is able to do so with impunity. So he's shameless, and he enables us to feel less shame and guilt. So we put him in the White House, and for a period of time, the superego pressure is lessened. So electing Donald Trump is a defense against the shame and guilt inflicted by the superego. In this respect, it's kind of like getting drunk, medicating ourselves with alcohol. That also can defend us temporarily against the pressure of the superego, or any drug. It's usually a temporary high. It's what we call a manic defense. There usually comes a crash. I think there will be a crash. But anyway, this is with the help of Leo Rangel. one way of looking at the appeal of Donald Trump. If a great sinner gets to be president of the United States, I, a milder sinner, need to whip myself far less. Okay.